Let's talk about reflect for a moment. Now, this is a complicated subject, but I'm going to try to articulate it through what I think is the most common sort of response to reflect. And if you're watching tournament, what would you expect to see somebody do? You would expect them to get a knockdown and just stand here and do nothing, right? And this is really tempting. As you can see, I get a very nice punish because the grounded 2H there is nullifying my negative edge inputs. I'm able to release L and S, and because the ghosts do terrible damage, having them hit later is going to just, be a massive punish. I haven't rooted this for 1.32 at the time of filming, but the old version did like 7k damage or something like that, so we're going to be fine. And that's really tempting. But what's the problem with this? What's the problem with standing there and doing nothing? What you're doing, if you think about it, is establishing the moment of RPS as the single moment in this setup where my opponent, or your opponent, is able to dictate the timing. You're saying, hey, of course we're going to have some kind of RPS here. You're going to be able to do something in response to my options. But let's have this sort of scenario play out at the moment that you control, right? Whether you up-tack, whether you delay-tack, whether you immediate-tack, you know with an absolute certainty that you will be able to act on that frame that you recover, whether it's a frame 1 reversal or an attempt to cheese something out, like just moon jumping, right, depending on my spacing over the ghosts, or anything like this, right? If you're red Gogeta, trying to do your frame 4 projectile invul lariat to just get through the ghosts, force block, and pop them, right? Anything like this. What you're saying is, basically, why don't you decide when we play this game? Now that's cool. Obviously, when your opponent recovers, they'll always be able to act on frame 1, but there are just no frame 1 answers to Ghoki that are effective, and we'll talk about that in a different video. So what you really want to do is sort of play with when you leave that gap to mess with reflect, right? What if we were to do more or less the same thing, but shift our RPS toward the end of the combo? So here, I'm just going to do my normal setup with the first 2 ghosts, but I'm going to hold L. And I'm going to get a nice little punish here, which, maybe it doesn't do the same as the other one. You can consult the doc for the full sort of business here, but this does like 6.2k with a Z Broly ender. And what I'm doing is saying like, hey, I control when we have this standoff, right? Of course, my opponent could just double reflect and then mash light to force me to block. Remember, I'm not really in danger because I'm just moon jumping, right? I'm not swinging or anything. But they can, they can double reflect mash. But you'd have to be an actual psychopath to have that be your default response to Ghoki. They're not doing that as a reaction. They're doing that as a guess. And that is a wild guess that would have to come from some kind of really, really inbred metagame, right? Some kind of like strange thing where people play each other 24/7. So if you bait reflect with the third ghost, you can just kind of not worry about all of those things that can happen when you're standing here, right? Because, again, if Red Gogeta decides to do his, projectile invul lariat, he's just going to get hit, right? If I release S Ghost on time, he's just going to get hit, and then I can get an easy conversion with Super Dash. If my opponent tries to level 3, or like do something like that, obviously, either way I'm going to block, but I'm going to be much closer to them, maybe easier to punish, stuff like this, right? If they try to, DP against the S-Ghost, they're going to get hit, but if they try to double reflect DP my like mix or something, then again, they're crazy, and the timing is variable. That's the thing, right? I'm releasing these ghosts, but I'm not going to release L at the exact same time every time. I'm not going to release H at the exact same time every time if I bait with it, because I can bait with H or L, right? I can hold this and release these together. I can hold Super Dash and release H and L together to bait the second reflect, right? What if we, instead of defaulting to baiting with S-Ghost, we always baited with either H or L until we'd conditioned our opponent, and then we started baiting with S-Ghost, right? Once they assumed they got a guaranteed reflect, then we would start baiting with S-Ghost, and then they would be whiffing reflect, and we'd get our massive punish, right? What if we took that as our default approach? I think we would be much more successful. It's a really interesting thing to talk about, and I could talk about it for a long time, but I won't, because, I don't want to, first of all, overstay my welcome, and second of all, I don't want to sort of, run into too much of a theory area. But what I will say is that another thing that I like about this approach is that it justifies the auto meaty S spacing, right? Remember we talked about how off of 214M, if you're quick, now this is going to be a little too close, but, well, that's not really too close. If you're quick with the JH on the up back, you're going to get a guaranteed reflect on S-Ghost, or give your opponent a guaranteed reflect. Now, that's cool if you're baiting with Ghosts 2 and 3, right? But if you're baiting with S-Ghost, it's not cool. It is technically possible to whiff S-Ghost on an opponent who's waking up. It is extremely tight versus immediate tech. I personally cannot do it consistently because of the Ghoki nerf. You used to be able to release S and have it whiff to do a really cool bait as they woke up, so they would be like, oh, the Ghost is firing, I'm going to reflect. But I wouldn't try to do that. I would say that having that S-Ghost meaty and know for an absolute fact that your opponent can't frame 4 is a really nice advantage to baiting with Ghosts 2 and 3, if that's clear. So I'll stop talking about this, but we're going to talk about other forms of counterplay in just a second. And I'd be interested, for people to follow up on this with me and talk about how you approach sort of this RPS and how you control the moments, because it's a thing that's kind of evolving in my mind.